These are the best teams from every single Fortnite region and the winners of FNCS Major 1. Brazil's winners were PHZine and Kitos. And firstly, this game I watched, peep the RNG. Shockwave hammer on the floor loot as he's landing in, and another one in a building that he loots later on. I know many players would have loved to have this many shockwave hammers across the entire weekend. Now, since they're uncontested here, they have a lot of leftover heals which they all throw into the center of this POI. And that's because when they're going for Storm Surge tags, this allows them to be a little bit more dangerous and take a lot more damage in return, also give out more damage at the same time because they always have these leftover heals close by. Because they get their damage relatively early and Anvil Square is pretty close to the center of the map, they basically have complete free reign of whatever power positions they want that are near the center of map. In this game, they set up in this gas station which is right at the edge of the zone, so they can take advantage of all of the players rotating in and tag them as they're moving. But many players would make the mistake of staying here for too long, and once all these players get towards you, getting stuck in amongst all of the congestion. So what they do is they actually move out earlier over to a bush and then continue to take advantage of those players which are now in the edge of the safe zone. From this position, they just need to play the rest of the game slowly because they both have shockwave hammers, so no big plays are really needed, unlike Zagu and Pipo, the Asia winners, who had a really interesting workaround for not having this incredibly powerful item. They land to the north side of Slappy Shores, meaning that there's no Oathbound chests here, giving them a much lower chance of having shockwave hammers. Zagu gets the Shadow Striker reality augment, which allows him to get shadow bombs by opening containers. Now, the north side of Slappy Shores actually has the most containers of any drop spot, being 84. So this is a lot of opportunities to get free mobility. Once he gets fully stacked up to 6 in his inventory, he drops those off to people and then continues to open more containers. Notice how he doesn't break anything underneath these because that will not count as opening them, so it's just to manually open every single ammo box, chest, or produce box. And the versatility of this item is actually massive. You can see people gets beamed for a bunch, loses some HP, so he heals up, and then just shadow bombs away. He can easily escape. But what makes these so good is you can keep opening containers later on, including fishing barrels, which are all over the map to give you more and more shadow bombs. And the majority of times, they just use these in mid-game rotates to avoid getting shot. You can easily just rotate through in the open and have players blatantly look at you and not even notice you at all. They also massively take advantage of the Harvester and Bush Warrior reality augments, similarly to EU winners Tayson and Moustache. Since Tayson and Moustache land at Slappy Shores and this first zone is over to the west side, they have to choose a path on which way to rotate, despite also having incredible shockwave hammer floor loot RNG. One of the things that Tayson does really well, regardless of whichever season I watch him, is to find the path of least resistance. Since most of the power positions on this side of the map are on top of buildings high up on this ice ridge, by staying close to the wall, he completely cuts off their line of sight from being able to see him. However, a problem arises once they make it into zone, as this is a large open area where Thomas HD is sitting up on a hill, easily tagging them. A lot of players would just sit in this bush and start spraying at players around them. However, what they do is they ensure they shoot shots back at him in particular, so that he ends up placing a cone and blocking off this angle for him, meaning Tayson and Moustache can rotate freely after this. And naturally, they do still get tagged up and lose a bunch of HP, but they've chosen the reality augments very well to counteract this. Both have Bush Warrior and Harvester, which means that once they've taken damage, they can sit in a bush, gain their HP all the way back up to 150, and then harvest a bunch of trees around them, which because of Harvester will drop a bunch of extra heals that they can use to get up to 200 HP. With the Harvester reality augment, this actually doubles the amount of shield you gain from these mushrooms, meaning that they're easily able to get up to 200 HP without using any of their minis or any of their chug splashes. But that's not the only good thing about these two reality augments. Whilst harvesting the trees, you can also get bush bombs, which means that wherever you situate yourself, you can always place new bushes and continually gain that HP back. Given a similar zone, Middle East winners Rapid and QND do a completely different strategy. They land at South Faulty Splits, and despite the fact that the zone is up in the northwest, they actually rotate down to the southeast because they know there's a bunch of teams that are fighting here that they can take advantage of. They set up in two different locations, QND being on this tower and Rapid being on this hill, which gives them multiple angles to take tags on these players. Given these teams will also have to rotate up to a far zone and eventually have to push past QND and Rapid, this creates a wall that they'll inevitably always have to rotate through, giving them more and more damage. A small little side note on this is that QND finds an extra hammer when he's leaving this area, and he ends up actually just boxing it in to ensure that other teams don't get it. So this team does a really good job of disrupting the teams that are around them and making their games worse. But you can't always keep your distance from other players, and sometimes you need to get straight into their faces. And Rapid has a small mechanical trick that he does here that's really nice. Notice as he's trying to replace the wall in front of him, he also grabs the wall to the left of him, which in this case was incredibly important because he gets ramped over. Now this wall to the left ensures that he can edit out of this box and continue fighting on. Had he not placed this wall here, he could have been completely boxed and wiped out the game. But once once you're inside that box, movement is really important. Notice how OCE winners Anon and Sons flies inside of this box, but rather than walking straight down the center, he stays to the complete right hand side of the box. This means that your opponent is always going to be in front of you at a specific angle. And see what that looks like from the opponent's POV. You can see that sometimes his own body is blocking the opponent's angle. Some people say the left's better, some people say standing to the right's better, but what's important is that you don't just run straight down the middle, as this allows your opponent to run around you. And I really like the way that they play endgame. Anon is following as the fragger, and notice the way his crosshair is placed. He's always scouting around him, looking for other players that they can make a play on. And in this particular case, they notice a player up above him, edit the wall, and try to take the floor from in front of them since they've cut them off. Since the opponent is at the back here, trying to fight and trying to box fight themselves, this allows them to easily jump into their box and pick up an easy elimination. Now, the actual mechanics of this aren't that important, but what's really key here is the way that Anon was scouting around whilst in the backside of the tar. If all you're doing is just following your tarper, you are completely useless as a fragger. And this is something that any West winners, Bolts and Thoric do very well as well. When you're continually scouting around, you'll notice opportunities like this player in Wood. Wood's a clear sign that these players are weak and vulnerable and that you can take advantage of that. And again, the actual play here is not important. It's the fact that they scouted for it and then were easily able to grab 3 different bodies of loot, causing them to win the game. Now, we'll come back to this game later because something very funny actually happens, even though they still somehow win the game. Now, those box fighting fundamentals might not be anything interesting, but watching any East winners, Cold and Acorns, certainly are. I know Acorn's an amazing player. Sorry, this section's just all going to be about Cold. One super minor thing that really interested me about the way that Cold plays is nearly every edit that he makes is going to be a top right peanut butter edit. But notice he does this in 2 separate different ways. He has the muscle memory down to do it from the top down to the right, and to do it from the right up to the top. This seems super minor, but as someone who only has the muscle memory to do one way down, it just shows me how practiced he is and how good his box fighting fundamentals are. And there's no better showcasing of that than how they won this game. Now watch this from Fatch's perspective and tell me how you win this. This clip is absolutely beautiful. He picks up a gold Maven auto shotgun from the floor and then tries to edit out, but instantly ramps and cones, boxing Fatch in. Now he makes a very smart play by editing out the right hand wall to give him a right hand peek and then hitting the first shot and blocking off Fatch's shot with 2 walls in front of him. And then he just continually bounces around that right hand side and picks him up with another quick shot. It looks simple when you watch it from his perspective, but boxing him as fast as he did and then ensuring that every single angle is a right hand peek, which is something that minimal players do even in arena, forget doing this in a final 1v1 in an FNCS Grand Finals. And another small thing that a lot of people seem to have forgot this season is the fact that cowcatchers still break builds, but PHZine and Kitos from Brazil still use this on players' floor to knock them out, allowing them to drop players down into their box and pick up easy refreshes. Aja's, Peebo, and Zagu have a really cool strategy to end up just cleaning up a final game from height. Peebo ends up dropping down and hammers himself directly upwards by not moving any of his directional sticks, destroying the builds down below, which allows Zagu to take shots from above and pick up an easy elim. Then it's a 2v1, so they finish the game relatively easily. And the OCE boys, Anon and Sons, did something very similar to this, where Sons destroyed the final box and Anon instantly just pre-fired and picked up that final elim. It's a cool strategy, but fingers crossed, Shockwave Hammers are no longer in the game next season, so we don't have to talk about this item anymore. And I mentioned I'd talk about this game that Bolts and Thoric won, so here we go. They pick up the refresh, get a bunch of elims, and basically Bolts is the quintessential NA West player, using the Chili Chug Splash speed boost and all of the additional mats. He fires up to high ground and just build fights for it, but does manage to get it. Since Thoric's gone to the front, he uses that final Shockwave Hammer to fly to the front, but unfortunately gets chopped out, and since he used the last boost of that Shockwave Hammer, he can no longer use it to cancel the fall damage, and unfortunately gets knocked. Now Thoric is the godly teammate who manages to come in, get the revive off, and gets him back straight up into the game, and they actually managed to retake high ground after this. And the win moment comes around full circle, where Bolt does have the charges left in his hammer, cancels the animation, meaning he'll fall without taking any fall damage, and picks up an easy elim on low ground, and then after not reloading his shotgun, does manage to win the game. So if Shockwave Hammers are still in next season, you do have to be careful on high ground to ensure you always have one additional charge left, or you're going to fall to your death. Now, since these teams all won their respective region, they've all qualified to the FNCS Global Championships at the end of the year, an in-person event. But on EU, there's actually 2 slots, and that went to Malabuka and Thomas HD. And I have an entire video covering how Malabuka plays, which you can watch right here.